parents sold our house when I turned 18, leaving me homeless so they could travel 5 years later. Mom shows up crying because Dad cheated. I laughed in her face and shut the door. I lost my home and was cut off by my parents when I was 18, almost 5 years ago, right? From my childhood, I had a very troubled relationship with my parents. I could tell that I was not somebody who was wanted. Whenever I was little, I would try to get them to love me and gain their affections. But when I realized that it was pointless, I stopped trying and started minding my own business. I think that change started taking place around the time of middle school or high school. By high school, I would only ever speak to my parents when I needed something and wouldn't bother them otherwise. It was not that I did not want a relationship with them. It's just that they had made it so obvious to me that they did not want a relationship with me that I felt bad. Even trying to bother them when I needed something, even though I knew that I could not rely on anybody else, I only had them. My dad was a pediatrician, and my mom used to teach science in middle school, so they were both pretty good with kids. It's pretty ironic how they were great with other people's children, but not so much with their own. Anyway, by high school, I had decided that I was not going to bother trying to win them over. We led very separate kinds of lives, and I would barely even see them. My dad would come back home pretty late, and even though my mother would come back home around the same time as I did, we would not talk to each other. We did not even have any conversations, and just stayed in our own rooms. I'm not even kidding. It was like sharing a house with strangers. To be honest, we had the absolute bare minimum of interactions, and that was it. I also knew that for college, I would have to find my own way because on my 18th birthday, they had made it very clear to me that so far, they had been there for me because, well, it was legally necessary for them to do so. But now, since I was no longer a minor, I had to start making my own way in life. They made it sound like they were encouraging me to be independent, but I knew what it really was about. They just wanted me to stop depending on them. They couldn't care less about whether I was independent or not. I hadn't applied to any colleges at that point since I had decided to take a gap year to try to build some capital. I knew that I would need money to survive, and until I had that, I couldn't even dream of going to college. So after I turned 18, I started looking for jobs. Soon enough, I started working at a local supermarket. I did not get paid much, but it felt nice to finally earn something for myself. Unfortunately, my happiness was short-lived since just a couple of weeks after I got that job, I had a new set of worries to think about. Shortly after I got the job, my parents announced to me that they were selling the house and that I needed to start looking for a place. I had no idea what was going on the day that they told me. When I asked them why they were selling the house, they told me that they planned on quitting their jobs and traveling around the country with the money that they got. They told me that apparently they had been saving for something like this their entire lives. Now, since I had a job and I was old enough to live on my own, they did not have any responsibilities to worry about. They were doing what they had planned, and they were giving me a heads up so I could sort out my life accordingly. That put me in a really difficult situation, because I had just started working and I did not have enough money set aside to rent an apartment, not even if I had roommates to split it with. I had barely started saving up money at the rate that things were going. Even if I lived on the streets, I still wouldn't have enough money to start college by the next year, like I had planned. My parents had dropped this bomb on me that I would be homeless if I didn't get a place of my own. I tried to talk it out with them and requested that they not sell the house and just put their plans on hold for at least a few months so I would have enough time to prepare myself and move out. But they were very stubborn and did not care about what I was going through. They told me that they had waited for this long enough and were not putting off any of their plans anymore. What I was going to do was my problem and not theirs. My mother told me, "You are an adult now, and we don't need to take responsibility for what you do anymore. As for the house, that's our property, and binkinas." Neither did I hear from them, which is not surprising since I had known that they would never try to get back in touch with me. Once I had left, I told them they were terrible people and hoped that only terrible things happened to them since they would totally deserve it. I cursed them out, not even caring that they were my parents and much older than me. I just didn't care anymore since they were screwing me over without caring about what was going to become of me either. The problem was that even though I had left the house in a huff, I realized afterward that I had literally nowhere else to go. I did not have any family members who would be willing to take me in, since my parents hadn't exactly kept in touch with their families. Both my parents lived away from their respective families, and since they had never bothered to attend most family events and usually didn't even go home for the holidays, I did not have a strong relationship with anybody from my family either. I barely knew anyone, so it would be foolish of me to expect them to take me in, and I wouldn't be able to reach them either, since we lived in a different state. I did have a few friends from school, but they were all away at college at the time that I left my house, and I didn't want to bother them or their parents because that would be pretty awkward. So I decided to take a leap of faith. I called a coworker of mine, who is now my wife. It's a crazy string of events, but I'm glad that I decided to reach out to her that day at the supermarket where I worked. She was in charge of the makeup department there, and we had been flirting back and forth ever since I joined. We had become pretty good friends in a really short span of time and knew a lot about each other. I knew that she also had a lot of issues with her parents, so I also knew that she would understand what I was going through. She was 2 years older than me, and just like me, she had not been able to go to college because her dad was an addict, and her mother did not seem to care about anybody apart from herself. The moment she had turned 18, her father left the house and moved in with his brother, and her mother told her that she could not support her anymore. So, that was her story. Since she was 18, she had been working so she could go to cosmetology school and become a professional makeup artist. When I called her and told her about what I was going through, she told me to come over immediately and said that I could live with her. I was, and still am, incredibly grateful for what she did for me that day. I don't think I would have survived on my own since it was pretty cold that time of the year, and I had nobody else who was going to help me out. Even though her apartment was pretty small and she was getting by on her own with a lot of hard work, she still chose to help me out, and that speaks volumes about the kind of person that she is. Anyway, she let me live with her, and for the first few months, I did not pay rent because I was still trying to save up money. I did contribute to the groceries and other bills, and after I had saved enough, I started contributing to the rent as well. Before we knew it, we had gone from friends to people who couldn't live without each other. Initially, my plan was to work at the supermarket for about a year and a half, but after cutting ties with my parents and realizing that I didn't even have a place to stay, I started working harder, and I'm still working there, but in a much better position. I applied for the position of floor supervisor, and thankfully I got the job since I had been one of the most sincere and dedicated employees. That's how it has been for the past year. I get paid decently, and my wife is now putting herself through cosmetology school. Finally, while working part-time at the store, things have been going well for us. We were happy until last week when my mother showed up unannounced. I don't know how she found me, since I have not been in touch with her for the past 5 years, but as soon as she saw me when I opened the door, she gave me a giant hug before I was even prepared for what was happening. I had made the mistake of not looking through the peephole before I opened the door. Once I had regained my composure, I decided to ask her why she was there. She was already putting her bags down in front of our apartment, and when I asked her that question, she stopped and looked at me really sadly before telling me that she was back because my father had decided to leave her. She filled me in on what she and my dad had been up to in the past few years, and I'll try to keep it short. They basically just traveled the country mourn, and after a lot of fighting, she decided to choose her dignity and self-respect and come back home. But now she needed a place to stay because she needed to save money for the divorce procedure. And she didn't have a lot of time left before retirement, so she did not want to waste her money by looking for a place to live. She decided that she was going to live with me without even asking me if I would be fine with it or not. And now that life had come full circle for me, I decided to repeat her very own words to her, the things that she had said to me about how I was an adult now, and they were not going to take responsibility for me anymore, and how it was their house. So, they could sell it and do whatever they wanted with it. They did not take my consent for it, and I would have to look out for myself. I know that since she needed my help. I told her that she was not my family anymore, so she had to look out for herself. And this was my house, so I could do whatever I wanted to do with it. I repeated those exact words to her with a huge smile on my face and then shut the door with a laugh. Probably the most satisfying thing I've done in my entire life, but my wife thinks that I went a little overboard and feels that I should give her another chance. She hasn't been fighting with me, but after she witnessed what happened the other day, she thinks that I was a little too hard on her and that I should at least think about it before I reject her. Her parents have passed away in the past few years. I guess that is where this is coming from. But nevertheless, I did for turning my mother away when she came back after 5 years to ask me to let her live with me. Update 1. I spoke to my wife about what she said. We have not been fighting about what happened, but she was definitely a little put off, and I could sense that she was not exactly happy about what I had done. However, she knew that this was my personal issue with my mother, and I could choose to deal with it in whatever way that I wanted to. It was not exactly her place to comment on it. So, she had been trying to restrain herself, but that was putting a lot of pressure on our relationship. And so yesterday, after making that, and then reading a couple of comments on there, I decided to talk to her. I told her about my childhood and explained to her how my parents had always treated me badly, like I was a pariah in my own house. I had even been okay with that. I always tried to make myself invisible, but even that was not enough for them. They had to make things even more difficult for me, which is why I did not feel guilty in the slightest by turning away my mother when she needed my help. They had not even bothered to check on me for the past 5 years. Now she was only here because she needed me to rescue her. I explained my situation to her, even though she knew most of what happened. She then apologized to me for reacting that way. And just as I had suspected, she told me that she was just having a rough time because she had lost both her parents in the past few years, her dad to addiction and her mother to a heart attack. So she was feeling kind of touchy about this and she misjudged my intention, but it's all fine between us now. So I'm glad that we talked it out. My mother, in the meantime, has been a total nightmare to deal with. I don't understand why, but she has gotten it into her head that harassing me through social media will somehow make me more inclined to open up my home to her. She had a very easy solution, just to apologize to me and hope for the best. But being the narcissist that she is, she decided that she was going to do everything wrong and see how that works out for her. She started posting about how her son and her husband were treating her with unprecedented cruelty at this stage of her life, and she regretted investing so much time in both of us. She accused me of being just like my father and abandoning her when she needed it the most, not even bothering to mention how she had literally done the same to me, if not worse. She has created a fake profile and has been tagging me, my wife, and all of our friends and family in her posts. I don't even know how she knows so much about my life, like who I am married to and where I live. And it's kind of creepy now because I don't remember telling her about any of this, and none of this information is public. My wife and I have private accounts on social media, so I don't know how she's getting any of this info. Everybody I know who has been tagged in those posts is trying to report that account and get it posted. But to do that, I honestly don't know what to do right now. It's just really frustrating and annoying more than anything else. I just wish my dad would take her back or something, so we would not have to deal with this nonsense so far. It's just been annoying, and I hope that it stays that way because I don't want any real-world impact from this update. So, it has been 2 weeks now, and my wife and I are still dealing with the repercussions of saying no to my mother. After the posts, she started escalating things to a new level. She started showing up at my store and would keep giving me nasty looks throughout the time that she spent there. Usually, she kept showing up around noon and would spend about an hour and a half at the store, constantly looking at me angrily, but I did not care about it. I tried my best to ignore her altogether because that was the best way of dealing with her. I did not pay any attention to her for a week. Yesterday, I guess she finally realized that there was no point in trying to intimidate me like that. Once again, she did the absolute opposite of what would get her in my good books. Once again, yesterday, she did not show up at the store, and I was kind of relieved because I thought that she was finally letting this go and wouldn't bother me again. When I left the store after my shift was done, she was waiting near my car. She did not look angry, surprisingly, just upset. I felt kind of bad for her because she looked much worse than when she had shown up at first. I don't even know where she is staying for now because, as far as I know, she cut ties with most of her friends here when she left. If she's trying to save money, a hotel would probably be too expensive for her anyway. But I did not ask her because it's none of my concern. Anyway, once I got near my car, I tried to ignore her and get in. But she stood in my way till the very last moment and kept telling me that she needed to talk to me. Finally, after 5 minutes, I gave in and asked her what exactly it was that she had to say to me. Now, after all the nonsensical things that she had done, she started crying, and I was not even talking calmly or quietly. I was talking full-blown wailing. She literally burst into tears when I asked her and couldn't even bring herself to talk. At that point, I started getting a little concerned. I don't like my parents. I really don't like my mother, but I am still a human being, and I knew that she was hurting. There is no other explanation for the way she was behaving. So I tried to calm her down and told her to sit in my car with me so she could compose herself, and then we could talk. Had it not been for her little outburst, I probably would not have asked her to sit in my car and talk to me. I think that was necessary for me to mention after the last update that lots of people have called me very unwelcome names just for being human. So I'm just making it clear. The reason that I have not contacted the police or a lawyer yet is purely out of humanity. And also because there are a few practical reasons. It's a lot of trouble, effort, and money. Not everybody has that kind of time and cash to spare, so that's why I haven't gotten into any of that. Anyway, once she was in the car, it took her a while to calm down. But then she finally started telling me that ever since they had moved to California, my father had been acting really weird. When she found out about the affair, she was shattered. She had only come back because she couldn't bear to be in the same place as him anymore, since it reminded her of how much he had hurt her, and she was relying on me to help her out. Because truth be told, she didn't even have any money. She had to borrow money from a few of her friends in California to even make the trip here. She had quit her job several years ago when she started traveling with my father, and then she had never worked again. When they were in California, she did not have a job, so she had been a stay-at-home wife and had been counting on my father for money. But now that their marriage was over, she did not have anybody to go to. She hadn't bothered to keep in touch with any of her friends back here, and neither did any of her family members care about her. So I was the only person she could count on. She sounded pretty desperate, but I was just mostly disappointed. After hearing her out, I told her that the most I could do for her was give her some money for her expenses, but that was it. Under no circumstances was I ever going to agree to let her stay in my house with me. I did not trust her enough for her other turn. And then she walked away today. When I went to work, she did not show up even once, and I'm beginning to think that she has finally received the message and is going to stay away from us now. Or at least I hope that's the case because I'm really exhausted, and I don't want to deal with this anymore. Update 3. My mother has not tried to contact me for almost a month now, and I think she has finally left. I don't know exactly where she is, but at least I found out how she was able to get all of my information. I had an old account on Facebook, which I haven't been using for the past couple of years since I forgot the password to it. And I have moved on to a new account because there was no other way to get it back since it was associated with an email that I don't use anymore. So, I started a new account. But unfortunately, that last one was a public account. I'm assuming that's where my mother got most of her information from. I had tagged my friends in their photos, which I had posted on that account, which is where she got those accounts from, and a lot of pictures of me in front of our apartment. I hadn't bothered to censor anything, so I think that's how she found out where I was living. I didn't do anything about it because there was no point, since now she already knows certain things about me. And I'm pretty positive that she will not try to get back in touch with me again. She has tried her hand at it and has realized that it is pointless, so she will not waste any more time here. I don't know what she is up to now because I haven't talked to her in quite some time, and I really want to keep it that way. I don't want her to reach out to me at all. Do I hope that she's doing okay? Yes, of course I do. I am still a human being above all else. And my personal grudges against her aside, I don't want anything bad to happen to her, but I don't want her anywhere around me is what I mean. A few of her friends reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and told me that after I had turned her down, she had reached out to them to ask for help, but they had not responded to her either. And there was no reason for them to do so either because she had snubbed them for so many years when it was they who were trying to talk to her and keep in touch. So, now, when she needs them, they don't really need to step up as her friends. They told me that she had been living in a motel, a little out of town, for the past few weeks, that she had been here since she had mentioned it in her messages, but now she had blocked all of them. So, they were assuming that she was gone now and did not need their help anymore. Let's see what happens now, because I know for a fact that she will definitely try to reach out again when the divorce procedure actually starts. Update 4. So, big news here. It has been almost a year since I last spoke to my mother. I was actually pretty surprised that so many months had passed and she did not try to talk to us because, as far as I was concerned, I thought that she was getting a divorce. And since, as she claimed, she did not have any money, I was really confused as to how she was going to pay for the lawyer. But then recently, I heard from a few of my family members that apparently she and my father were back together. Again, I was really shocked because my mother had been really torn up about how my father had betrayed her the last time that we met, and now all of a sudden they were back together. That just didn't make any sense to me. I had met a few relatives at a cousin's wedding, which is how I got to know this. My parents, like usual, did not attend, but I really wanted to know how exactly they had gotten back together. So, I decided to speak to some of my aunts, even though I'm not very close to them. I really wanted to get to know more of this gossip, and they were really good at this. So, they told me exactly what had happened. Apparently, a couple of weeks after my mother had gone back to my father, she had given him an ultimatum and told him that he could either file for a divorce since he hadn't done that yet, or she would do it herself, and she would make sure that she did not spare him in the process. Thankfully, for the two of them, my father had tried to talk to that waitress about marriage and had told her that he had left his wife for her. And the funniest bit is that she wasn't even interested in him like that. She was actually sleeping with a lot of other guys as well. My father just happened to be one of those idiots who had fallen for her. And so it's better that they stick together. My wife and I had a great laugh over this. I guess things ended up going pretty nicely for them. as they have become the laughingstock of the family. That's precisely what I had expected from them. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.